Hello everyone, I'm Scott Leadingham. Thank you for joining us today. I am with Tom Banse, the regional correspondent for the Northwest News Network based in Olympia, but roving all over the Northwest. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tom.
I'm so glad to be with you.
And if anyone has any questions, if you're joining us for the live stream, you can ask those in the comments section on Facebook, and we'll try to get to them throughout the time here. And if not, we'll maybe get to them afterward. Tom, first I want to ask you about some high-speed rail projects that are being proposed for the I-5 corridor to connect Portland, Seattle, Vancouver, British Columbia. It's been talked about a lot of studies going on, but realistically, is that ever going to happen?
It's going to be a long time from now if we ever see it happen. Hopefully, I think in my case and a lot of listeners here in the I-5 corridor, there's a lot of interest in seeing it happen. People who've traveled to Europe, for example, or Japan, or Korea, or China, and have used high-speed rail are always come back saying, why can't we have that here? But I see two big issues that are going to be high hurdles to get over. One is the cost of construction. In the very first feasibility study of high-speed rail in Cascadia, the ballpark estimates were $24 billion to $42 billion just to build this and acquire the right-of-way. That's a big lift. And the other part of it is acquiring right-of-way. This is an urbanized area, and high-speed rail of the nature we're talking about here, over 250 miles per hour, that's not going to run on the existing freight rail and Amtrak line. There's going to have to be a whole new dedicated corridor and railway, probably requiring a lot of tunneling to do that. And I sense the public is kind of gun shy of big infrastructure projects. The Highway 99 tunnel under downtown Seattle, way over budget, way behind schedule. High-speed rail is now under construction in California, also behind schedule, over budget. So it's going to be politically somewhat difficult, but as you heard reported, the studies are getting more detailed for the time being. The governors in Oregon, Washington, the premier of British Columbia got together last week, put in a little more money to do a kind of a business case analysis to see if there maybe is a way to make this happen.
Okay, so that's the I-5 corridor. What about connecting the dry side to the wet side, if you will, for those Northwest people who are familiar with that terminology? Spokane to Seattle connection, Tri-Cities to Portland. Is there anything that's ever going to happen with those projects?
Well, the boosters, if you will, and I kind of put them in the Cascadia rail camp, have envisioned a side branch line off the north-south line that would go east-west, probably Seattle over the mountains to Yakima, Tri-Cities, and then up the Highway 395 corridor to Spokane. That is, however, not getting as serious study as the Vancouver, Seattle, Portland line, partly because there aren't enough people, to be honest, that would make it pay. So every now and then you have politicians say, hey, don't forget, also, can you please look at the east-west line? I don't see that happening in our lifetime. So,
okay, well, maybe if that doesn't happen in our lifetime, maybe some other projects that are being tested around the region will. One is a electric drone helicopter passenger system that's being tested in eastern Oregon right now. They're in the high desert. How about that? What's the reality and what's kind of going on with that testing phase?
I'm really interested in that, and I don't know about you if you'd be willing to get on kind of a quadcopter, a passenger drone, if you will, that's big enough to take one or two or four people. But I'd like to try that, something without a pilot that would be remotely, in many ways, autonomously transporting us across urban corridors. I see this happening. I mean, it's that prototype that we're talking about, which is called the Vahana project, a subsidiary of Airbus, has leased a hangar at Pendleton Regional Airport to do the flight testing. That is flying, and it's very preliminary, a one-passenger prototype that for the time being is being tested without any humans aboard. There are 20 other companies around the world that have variations on this of kind of electric vertical takeoff and landing and horizontal flight. That would be cast kind of as an urban mobility solution is how it's phrased. So if it happens eventually in the Northwest as a commercial enterprise, I would probably only see it being in Seattle and the Portland area. The flight distance with the battery-powered aircraft of this type is about 40 miles, give or take. So it's pitched as a faster way to get across a really congested urban area.
So I guess we might have to wait for the Star Trek technology of transportation through time and space to transport us between Spokane and Seattle or elsewhere more quickly.
But I will say, Scott, though, if we have listeners in the Pendleton area, I haven't actually seen this fly myself, but if you've perhaps been over to the cafe at the airport, where if you take a seat at the window and it's your lucky day, you might see this thing flying out the window. And tell us what you thought if you did see that.
Yeah, that would be great. It'll pitch right here. If anyone has a picture of that sort of project in Pendleton, Oregon, or elsewhere around the Northwest, shoot us that picture on Facebook or on our Tumblr page for Northwest Public Broadcasting, and we'll share it around with others in the region. Tom, let's move on to another big story, kind of in the technology sector, Bitcoin mining and Wenatchee. And for those who don't know any idea what the heck Bitcoin is, Bitcoin mining is, tell us a little bit about what that is and why it's happening, and frankly, in such a big, booming way in Wenatchee.
You'd save the hardest question for last, of course, because I've been covering Bitcoin since 2014, and I still have trouble explaining what Bitcoin mining is in a way. Like I kind of pitch it as, could I explain this to my grandmother? And I'm still not sure I've settled on it. But in short, what it's not is actual mining with picks and axes and people with hard hats. The best comparison, perhaps, is to a computer data center, of which we also have many in the Northwest. But in this case, it's stocked to the brim with very specialized chips and processors that do really only one thing, which is lend their computing power to the global Bitcoin network and process transactions and maintain that global ledger for this virtual currency. And if it's a good day, the owner of a Bitcoin mining rig anywhere gets a small reward in Bitcoin. And to make that happen, though, you need really cheap electricity. And that's the attraction of Central Washington for this. The Mid-Columbia public utilities, basically Chelan PUD, Grant PUD, and Douglas County PUD, have some of the cheapest electricity in the nation. And so these little computer rigs, then multiplied over a whole warehouse full of them, are running full tilt 24 hours a day, getting really hot, as kind of like if you really work your smartphone hard, it gets warm in your hand. They're just sucking electricity all day long and getting a very small reward, on the order of 10 or 20 Bitcoin. And to make that pay, you need really cheap electricity.
Fascinating to watch. Tom, real quickly, we did have a question come in, and I wanted to address it. It has nothing to do with transportation or Bitcoin or anything like that, but it's a hot topic at the moment, and you covered a little bit about it, relating to the police use of deadly force laws in Washington State and police accountability and how that played out in the legislature this year. Could you just briefly explain what happened with that and what is going on in the state of Washington with that?
Well, there was a campaign that was kind of had as its face the relatives of people who have died in confrontations with police in Washington State. They collected enough signatures to put a ballot measure in front of the legislature. So it's an initiative of the legislature, which in most cases, the legislature just kind of says thank you and ignores, which by process puts it on the next general election ballot. We all thought that's what was going to happen with this one. This is a measure that would change the standard, which is our threshold for charging a police officer for an unjustified shooting, which right now is almost impossible to do in Washington State, to something where, under the circumstances where a reasonable officer in the same kind of situation might have done things differently, that a prosecutor maybe could bring charges. That proposal was adopted by the legislature. The police and the advocates for police accountability got together and decided they didn't want a really divisive fall ballot campaign. The legislature passed that through. Now, the thing that kind of makes this so interesting now is that the approach the legislature took is not one that's specifically laid out in the state constitution as an option for dealing with an initiative to the legislature. And so you'll probably hear us reporting next month a little bit on a court challenge to say, can the legislature, which do what they did in this case, adopt the initiative as an option, but then immediately amend it and keep it off the fall ballot.
Topic to keep aware of and to watch your reporting on. Finally, Tom, you have been reporting for a long time. I don't know exactly how many years, but a long time, more than anyone else around in the Northwest News Network. And I'm just curious, what is your observation about how the Northwest, Washington, Oregon, Idaho has really changed in that time frame? Have you witnessed the changes, economically, politically, geographically, whatever, in that time frame?
I guess that my takeaway from doing road trips, and this week I had kind of a nice contrast. On Tuesday, went up to Sequim and Port Angeles, Washington. Then on yesterday, Thursday, went up to Seattle. The growth is so uneven around the Northwest. And I'm just struck on some drives, like that trip up the Olympic Peninsula alongside Hood Canal. It's pretty much the same as it was 20 years ago or 25 years ago when I first made that kind of a reporting drive. But then going up to Seattle is just a total, roll of the dice. If what should be an hour trip will take 2 hours or 2.5 hours, as it did yesterday when I was trying to get home and got home late for dinner. And you'll see that, Portland's booming, the Tri-Cities are booming, Seattle's booming. Get out to rural Oregon or rural Washington, and there might be a new building here or there, but it looks just the same as it did when I started my career.
Well, we won't keep you too long or keep you from getting to dinner home tonight. Thank you so much, Tom Banse, regional reporter for the Northwest News Network. You can connect with him on Twitter at Tom Banse. I am at Scott Leadingham. And if you'd like to connect with us at Northwest Public Broadcasting on Twitter, we are at NWP Broadcasting. And find Tom's and all the other N3 reporters, their stories online at nwpb.org. If you have any questions or comments about today's program or about future topics you'd like to see us explore, go ahead and leave us a comment there on Facebook and we'll try to get to it. Thank you so much, Tom, and thank you everyone for joining us here in the unique Northwest.